Welcome back, social media. Friends, strangers, and acquaintances, family, extraterrestrials, underwater Today I came to read to you. And usually I read out of a book, but today I'm going to read out of a magazine. This month's Down East, which is a reference to a geographic region of Maine. Stephen King's favorite bookstore. Whoa! That's something you put on the cover to get people to buy it. But anyway, we're going to read something, a little ditty written by, excuse me, let me get my flashlight, Joseph Monninger. I haven't quite got the balance of having the proper light for recording my face and reading. I used to be able to read in the dark, but now I'm 45 and I cannot. I thought I had like special powers. I could read in the dark, see in the dark. The dark was fine for me. In the past 10 to years or so, I've noticed I need light. I need a lot of light to read. And so I'll be using a flashlight to read this to you right here. Because like if I turn on all the big lights in here, it's it'll be glaring everywhere all over, and it won't be a good thing to look at. And we know that's why you're here. That's why I stopped writing. For now. But anyway, by the way, to those, if anyone ever, editors at Down East, I love your magazine, and I hope one day to write for you. If you give me an assignment, I will get an A. Alright. Anyway. And I'm going to read, like I said, Joseph Moninger's, it's called Last Stand. Final Days on the Maine Coast. Final Days on the Maine Coast. Here is what it looks like. There you go. And there's Jim. Hold on, let me get it. There's Jim. He looks a little troubled in this picture. So it makes you wonder, last stand, like what's happening? Is land getting taken away? You know? Those big industrialists, they want to put a Walmart there or something and then give the residents a fucking minuscule tax break. Anyway, let's read Jim's words. A bald eagle visits me nearly every day. I have learned to recognize his voice as he approaches. A querulous complaint against the crows that usually accompany him like a desperate ring of quarters vying for his attention. To people who will listen, I have mentioned that to be an eagle is to be harassed from sunup to sundown. It's true. If you see a bald eagle, usually the crows are not far behind. Uh, if the crows leave him alone for a moment, their place is taken by herring gulls cursing his existence. No one likes an eagle, except other eagles, it seems, and the eagle shrinks down when the birds dive at him, this bandit among the large pines, half amused, half ashamed of his bulk and thieving nature. He settles on the topmost rim of branches, a Billy Budd foretopman, his eyes scanning the cold waters of the Pennamanquin River as it merges with Cobscook Bay. I count on his visits and keep 2 sets of binoculars nearby, wanting to have a pair within reach wherever I happen to be on my 2 acres of land in Pembroke, a small community that once took its living from the sea. I am aware that the eagle has become something of a project for me. My son, When he calls from his home in New Hampshire, asks if I have seen the eagle that day, and I know that he is asking out of kindness, out of an acknowledgement of my age and the emptiness of my daily calendar. And yet I can't help playing my part in relating to him the itinerary of the eagle's visit. Yes, I tell him the eagle came early this morning, stayed for nearly 15 minutes, and yes, it was on that perch on the eagle tree, the name I have for the bird's favorite pine. Last year a storm took down the tallest pine overlooking the water, and I worried that the eagle would find another place to rest, while the crows and gulls hectored him. Hectored is a word I don't know. I know heckled. I don't know hectored. But the eagle has taken to the new tree, and so it is a safe, light topic that my son and I can explore without any of the weightier subjects that circle around us. We both know that this beautiful land overlooking this vibrant estuary is the place I am making my last stand. I live here with stage 4 lung cancer. I did not know that before. By the way, so I pick up the magazine, I thumb through it, I read an article every now and again, and I read a paragraph out of this article, a paragraph in the middle, some pages ahead, and it was written in such a authentic, true way that I was like, oh, I'm gonna read. This is gonna be the next thing I read. This is written well. That sentence just hits me because my mother died of exactly those words. Stage 4 lung cancer. And I haven't seen those words in print. Probably since then. Whew. Okay. I live here with stage 4 lung cancer, each motion, however minimal, underlined by a dry cough. My fist to my lips, my heart and head and breath paused for a moment while I wonder if and how I will continue. So the eagle is useful and welcome. It is understood now that I am becoming mist, the ghost of my youthful life, an odd man who swims in the sea and rivers to bathe, a rough birch cane in my left hand to steady myself and sometimes to help me stand. I have chosen to live this way, to live near the sea, without running water, to surround myself with simple beauty. My days have been emptied of all fanfare and complication. I play chess on the computer. Read great gulps of books, nap, and study the weather both in the sky and in my chest. I watch the Red Sox replay in the early morning at first light, and I find I have not given up rooting for our beloved 9. Damn, Donald. I wasn't counting on this. I was an Orioles fan as a boy, but 40 years in New England has changed my loyalty. People move, and then their values and who they root for moves as well. You could put me anywhere on this planet. I'm not switching my teams. I'm a different person. All right. The players, however, are becoming missed as well. My childhood hero Brooks Robinson died this past year, but I see him in the young Sox players, see myself, honestly, standing at the plate, the smell and the taste of dirt and chalk and a dense wool uniform heated by the sun. Those memories are here too. In the evenings, I like a cocktail. I drink it on the porch overlooking the water, and if there is a wind from the northeast, I find it hard to warm myself. On damp days, I build a fire in a wood stove, a boxy cast iron stove with an inscription in Norwegian that might serve as some sort of motto for men my age. I bank my fire set for the evening. When the day is done, God grant my fire never die out. Yeah. Then more reading, or maybe a movie, and dreamless sleep. I leave the door open but the screen latched to catch the air, and some hours later I wake to the sounds of gulls again, their shadows passing across the floor of my small cottage like ash following the wind. This far east, the sun rolls quickly from the water, and the day begins again, filled with waiting, filled with the small occupations of someone using time not as a measure, but as a companion. Guilty. This is why people don't read. You know why? Because it can make you feel uncomfortable. I keep a seal count. Encouraged whenever I spot one of their dark heads, typically a harbor seal, peering at me from the water, and note it down as if by doing so I will arrive at some understanding of the health of the seal population. Lately, local fishermen have observed sharks in the bay, more numerous than usual, they say, and one seaweed collector claims he saw a white shark take a seal 50 feet off his shoreline. Uh-huh. Water's warming up. Sharks are coming more north. Regulations have been, on the seals, so now, the seals are back, so now the sharks are back. I tend to believe such things because it makes life here more flavorful and dramatic, and I cannot quite diminish their talk when I am chest deep in the water myself. Yep. A man may look a great deal like a seal, I imagine, and I have no strength to resist even the mildest attack. The middles of days are hardest to fill. The world is at work during those hours while I am released of that burden. I give myself jobs to do, ones that I can accomplish in small bursts of energy that sometimes arrive. I perform these tasks to have something to report. If anyone asks, what have I been doing? Stacking wood, I say, aware that any Mainer understands that as an ongoing necessity, and will let the conversation end without more questions. See, I'm going to steal that. The guy at poker who's like, "Hey Don, what have you been up to?" I'm just gonna be like, "Stacking wood. Leave me alone." Or, it's just the small talk aspect of it. It's like, if you want to have a conversation with me, I love conversation. Ask me a real question. Ask me a question with specifics. If you say, "Don, how are you?" I'm like, "I'm a lot of ways. Do you want to know them all?" Or I have friends like, "Don, tell me a story." What? I know a million stories. Yes, sometimes you say something will inspire or spurn a fucking tale out of me. But you can't be like, "Dance, monkey, tell me a story." Nah, it's not going to be good. Even if I do tell you a story, I'm going to tell it with resentment. It is useful work, we all know, and something we will be grateful for when the weather cools. I stack wood as if the individual pieces must be ordered and properly fit together, as if what I'm putting together isn't meant to come apart when the season changes. I love stacking wood, by the way. Like, this is the part I think I read randomly at first. And I was like, ooh, this is about wood. I'm going to read it. And it turned out to be about more than wood. I took too long at some segments of wood and mesmerized at seeing the tree and the part, the age, and the grain. I will see these pieces again some night after the geese start moving, after the orange flame of the wood stove converts them to the heat of cast iron figures formed in relief on the side of my stove. Nice. Years ago, when I was a young father, I wrote magic wood on a single piece of cordwood each year and buried it deep within the stacks. An inducement to get my son, as a boy, to carry wood up from the basement. If he found it, as he always did, he could trade it in for a trip to the movies or any day at a local arcade. His pleasure at each year's discovery fresh and triumphant, his glory at having a day of his own terms of victory for children living beneath the endless tyranny of their parents in every corner of the globe. My dad didn't hide a piece of wood to, get me to do the chopping and stacking and all the stuff that I did for heating our home when I was growing up. But it was implied, if not outright stated, that if you do this work in the winter, you will be taken fishing in the summer. So I kind of had a similar deal here. He typically set it aside and kept it as a contract between us, proof that he deserved something for the work he contributed to the house's warmth. Yeah, now in the piles I stack, there is no magic wood except when I come across a bolt of special beauty, the drama of seed, earth, rain, sunlight, snow, decay, weakness, imbalance, and final fall, represented in the weight I swing in my weak arm when I toss it into place. This guy's obviously a writer. Every 2 months I travel to Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Hanover, New Hampshire to visit my oncologist. The modernness, it's fancy. The modernity of the hospital complex. Its great wide windows and tiled floors, its welcoming bathrooms provides contrast to the simplicity of my seaside cottage. I receive a CT scan, a blood draw, and infusion, then a half-hour consultation with Dr. Dragnev, who oversees my treatment. He asks various questions about my breathing, about the cough that consistently clogs my lungs, about my bowels, my weight, my appetite, my sleeping. He is a practical man who nods at my statements. He has explained that it is unlikely I will collapse all at once, but beyond that he has no bankable predictions. It is a long, dull story, but I have been on a cancer-fighting regimen that on average adds 19 months to one's life. I am at 3 years presently. Not a record, as Dr. Dragnev reminds me, but not bad either. The day will come when my current approach will no longer work, and I will face the decision of how much more to endure, how hard to seek additional time, whether I can say to myself and to my loved ones that I have had enough. After the Dartmouth visits, I return to Maine with a pocket full of hope. I have 2 more months at least, I tell myself, and I try to make resolutions for the upcoming days. I will stretch more, eat better, take whatever walks seem within my ability. I will keep a neater cottage, make an effort to store things where they should go. Maybe I think I will chart the birds I see around me, keep a careful record, but this plan, like all my plans, is undone nearly as it forms. Ambition, even applied to the smallest tasks, no longer seems to spark in me. A kayak rack I had looked forward to building now seems an attempt at order that is chiefly an illusion. I suppose I know things can fall apart no matter how carefully one plans, so to go through the process of acquiring lumber, screws, and so on seems hollow. Simultaneously, I understand it is important to keep active, to keep pushing, despite what feels like futility. Often I end up in a stalled middle ground, not committing to the project but unwilling to let it go. I nap instead. I tell myself tomorrow will be the day to start. Procrastinators unite. Tomorrow. If I were a different sort of person, I might try to fill my days with social rounds, but that has never been my inclination. Even as a healthy, middle-aged man, I was never comfortable with the peck and paw of social interaction. A woman I once knew in Vienna, where I taught for a time, said to me, "You don't sit well." It was an offhand remark, but it has haunted me more than she could have ever guessed. I don't sit well. She was correct. And because of my relative isolation here, because of the simplicity of the way I live, I am able to indulge my preference for solitude without apology. My time is my own, even when I don't spend it particularly well. Some days I go out on a boat with my neighbor, Tim, who never fails to remind me of Steinbeck's friend Doc, a biologist and specimen collector, who is the unofficial mayor in the novels Cannery Row and Sweet Thursday. Tim is a native of Aroostook County, born there when his parents fell under the thrall of the Nearings, the back-to-the-land couple who wrote Living the Good Life and thereby launched a generation of people striving to inhabit more meaningful lives. When Tim's parents bought a parcel of land far up in Maine, the house they occupied had a tree growing up through the living room. That's awesome. I've gone with Tim to collect eels and hermit crabs. In some ways, he is a bounty hunter. After an order arrives on his computer or phone, he strikes a price and then he goes to look for whatever has captured the client's interest. He sells seaweed and clams, sponges, and scallops. He has sent eels to a client who hoped to keep them in a basement sump pump drainage basin, sponges to a Korean cosmetics manufacturer, the elements of a biology class aquarium, green crabs, seal, worms, and coral, to high schools all over the United States. He has sold seawater to a firm that needed high-quality salt water and bait fish to party boat captains in New Jersey. I go on these trips as an observer and keep him company. We have set lines for hagfish along the New Brunswick border and pulled lobsters from the middle of our bay. Behind the wheel of his boat, he reads the waters, pointing out shoals and islands, troubles and landmarks mixed together. I turn to him when something puzzling occurs in the water off my land. I turn to him this past week, for instance, the bay's surface has been blasted by small fish fleeing from something below. They create a sound like sand being thrown with great velocity against the water. Afterward, the sea settles and sometimes a seal's head emerges, a fish held crosswise in its mouth, while at other times a pair of cormorants, called shags up this way, paddles through the disturbance, their necks craned like question marks, asking something the menhaden failed to understand. In January or early February, the scallop fleet arrives. Our tiny harbor of simple mooring rigs fills quickly with boats from farther schools south on the Maine coast. Pennamequan Bay is a good anchorage, with Lighten Neck and Hersey Neck closing together to prevent wind and seas from mauling the fleet. Despite the relative calm the headlands create, a storm took one of the boats last year. I missed the actual sinking, but I woke to see an antenna protruding from the sea's surface like the ghost of sailing masts from an earlier century. 2 lobster boat crews towed the sunken ship to shallower water where they pumped it dry and raised it without great difficulty. The event, naturally, became the biggest news up and down Lighten Point Neck, bigger than even than the murder that occurred several years ago when one local woman shot and killed another for odd cash, drugs, and ancient animus. I don't know that word. Animus? 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 That's probably how you say it, animus. Anyway. Drugs and ancient animus. We're not going to stop to look that up, but we should look it up. From my deck, I can sometimes watch the scallop boats work at first light. This close to land, the crews rely on divers, local men in dry suits who comb the bottom of the seabed for scallops. Farther out, the draggers plow the bottom with their coarse nets, destroying habitat essential for urchins and other species. Tim thinks the solution might be underwater drones, small mechanical pickers that could be piloted by local teens paired up with old lobstermen. It's a forward-thinking idea, but he does not have much faith it will be pursued. Old fishermen are slow to change, and the money for a good scallop haul is the financial blood of the small fleet. The ships are gone by late February. The freeze used to come all the way down to the scallop boat's moorings, ice sliding like a blue-green sleeve over the arm of the bay, but in recent winters, the water has remained free and flowing. Snowfall is limited. I remain in the cottage and watch the weather, checking the radio to see if the weather report conforms to my observations. Night comes quickly, and I always buy lamp oil when I visit any hardware store during that season. Filling the reservoirs through a small funnel that hangs on the wall of my shed. With the wood stove going, with the lamps burning, I am aware of the quality of light I have chosen for this primitive living. From the sea, I am sure my home appears as a soft haze, the white smoke from the stove rising from the chimney, then, like a small bird deciding by the first current of wind which way it must inevitably travel. Well put. This past week, Steve Brown came to brush hog my 2 acres. It's like, I never knew what a brush hog was until Maine came into the picture. It's like a lawnmower, except for like, with a really big blade and able to like take down bushes and stuff. You know, like, it's literal, the name brush hog. It will hog your brush. We do it largely to keep down the colonizing aspens and to give a sense of orderliness to life. Steve has the most perfect Maine accent one can imagine, and I always make an attempt to engage him simply to hear the dialect. He is a conscientious man on a tractor, one who knows the idiosyncrasies of granite shelves and half-submerged boulders. In truth, he knows the topography of nearly all the land in this part of the world, having mowed it or lumbered it beside his father. I don't need to remind him of the burial plot in the center of the property, one with a cracked headstone that marks the resting place of Harriet Carr, dead sometime just before the Civil War. No one is quite certain where Harriet Carr came from. Some say she died aboard a ship and was buried on the first convenient hillside, but Steve knows where she ended. Goldenrod marks her place. left tall from Steve's thresher blade. Birds land on the flowers' heads, hang carefully as the plant decides to accept their weight, then skillfully launch themselves into the air like children sliding from a swing on the upward arc, their bodies temporarily suspended, neither falling nor rising. I love watching the birds land on the coneflowers. It is similar, like, and they come back to balance. All right, you can sit here. Geese arrive in the days after Steve finishes looking, I suppose, for new green grass. They avoid the meadow at its wildest, not trusting how the dogbane and desiccated lupin shafts form hideouts for potential predators. I wake in the morning to the murmuring of the geese as they graze. They sound contented, like country burghers too ample in the belly and fussy about their footwear. A lot of words I don't know in that sense. Remembering a lesson I learned in San Marco Plaza in Venice from an old guide many years before, I throw an oven mitt in the air to make the geese think a hawk is stooping at them. It worked miraculously with pigeons, but not, it seems, with geese. Sometimes they shy away from the mitt, but mostly they continue to feed, fouling the ground with an army of caterpillars formed of their waste. Okay. They make apologies by flying past my cottage at sunset, framed by the moon or a fleet of clouds as light begins to fall onto the ocean. On the very best mornings when I feel strong and hungry, I drive to Karen's Diner, located on the Maine drag in Calais, a stone's throw from New Brunswick. Every old man likes a breakfast diner, and I am no exception. I order the same thing every time. Guys, girls, whatever you want to be, don't order the same fucking thing every time. Live. Okay. I order the same thing every time, never sure I will have another chance to eat at Karen's. Scrambled eggs, link sausages, home fries with onions, homemade Texas toast, and orange juice, and plenty of coffee. I don't put my phone on the table or read, because the breakfast eaten among my fellow Mainers is delight enough. The same waitress serves me on each occasion. Her efficiency and skill, pleasure that I remember even as she makes it familiar once again. I know she will return with 2 coffee pots, 1 in each hand. Orange lip for decaf, black for high test, and when it comes time to pay, the bill will be plucked from a blue pad and turned upside down on the table while she says, "No hurry. Make your meal." That's an old phrasing. Make your meal. Then home. Down the Charlotte Road, past the Moosehorn Wildlife Sanctuary. If the weather is good enough, I will park near the Sealy flowage and take a swim. The water is filled with cattails late in the season, but bathers keep a sandy section clear. I strip out of my clothes down to the bathing suit I wear underneath my shorts, and I wade out. The pleasure of water encouraging me to go deeper, to let my feet swing, so that my body might become weightless. When I am well launched, I roll onto my back and float, water stopping my ears, my white, formless belly an island of flesh in dark, quiet sea. Joseph Monninger is the author of more than 24 novels and other books, including a 2023 memoir, Goodbye to Clocks Ticking, How We Live While Dying. That's probably pretty good. Probably have to get that. He taught writing at Plymouth State University for 32 years. After his cancer diagnosis in 2021, he settled year-round in Pembroke. Joseph. Thank you, Joseph.